Thank you so much. And thank you so much for joining us on this important community discussion to compare notes and thoughts and ideas on our digital video system here in South Orange. We've got a host of people available to speak with you tonight. I just want to show you up on the screen who will be joining us today. You have our village president, Sheena Collum. You have several board of trustee members and former members. You have our deputy administrator, Julie Doran, our IT director, Stan Wilkinson, our community care and justice director, Dr. Juan Rios, will be joining shortly. And you've got acting chief Stephen Dolanak and Sergeant Richard Lombardi from our police department. I wanted to share that because I want you all to know and understand that there's a huge effort behind community discussions like this, and in particular one that relates to updating policy. And we've got lots of people here inside of the village infrastructure that are interested in this topic and very keen to learn more about your views on the topic. To move on, I thought I would share a resolution that we made to establish our community police collaborative. You know, in it, we, the elected body in the village, talk about some guiding principles that we feel are important to us around trust and transparency and around engaging the community. And, you know, so I want to reiterate that those are the principles that we want to apply in this community discussion and as we review our policy around the camera deployment. I also want to take this minute to just give an amazing shout out to several of our CPC members. You know, we've had help from the community in terms of providing research that relates to cameras. We've had help from the CPC, who has a subcommittee that have put together some policy review and policy recommendations. We have a subcommittee of the CPC related to outreach who have put together a website around policing and community information around policing. And that website has lots of information about the camera program on it. And so, you know, just big thank you to all of those folks that have been involved in all of the information that they've shared. You know, their views have been really helpful, and they'll be part of the policy review overall. Jumping through, just to talk a little bit about the process, it necessarily includes everybody that you see on this screen. So it's a village effort from an administrative perspective, certainly from the perspective of your electeds. Our PD has been deeply involved. Shout out there to Sergeant Lombardi, who's put a lot of information together and actually put together a frequently asked question list, which you can find on the police department website. And of course, the CPC, who I already mentioned, and you, and just a little heads up, our Office of General Counsel has to be involved. When we update policy that relates to PD, it necessarily has to be reviewed by the Attorney General of the state, because PD is very much governed by the Attorney General and the guidelines that are set out there. We'll talk more about that in a minute, but wanted to give you a little bit of idea of who's involved and how the process works with each of the different parties that are involved. I also want to say that there is a form, an input form that you can use during this session, after this session. It's available for people that can't make this session to share your input. It focuses on 3 questions that we're going to touch on today. You know, what kind of information are you looking for? What are your views and concerns about a camera program? And, do you have any policy recommendations? You can access that Google form anytime throughout this entire discussion tonight, and it will be there, throughout the time that we're using to review the policy. So please use it. It's going to be a useful tool on our end because we can take all the information that is gathered there and sort it and digest it once we receive it. So thank you for that. With that, and on this slide, I'm going to turn it over to Acting Chief Dolinak, who I'm going to ask to turn on his camera and take himself off mute so that he can join us. And there he is. Welcome.
Hello. Okay. Welcome, everyone. I don't see myself on the screen, but I hope everyone else can see me.
You are on the screen.
Okay, very good. I'd like to thank everyone for attending tonight. I'd also like to thank all that put an enormous amount of work to make this event possible. This community, our elected leaders, and particularly Trustee Collier, our village professional staff, and police department personnel that assisted in creating all the information that's been background to this and that we'll be doing going forward. So what you see on the screen is the South Orange Police Department's mission statement. It's a very simple one, but it's memorable. And retired Chief Kroll, at the outset of his tenure, devised that. And this is something that we like to make sure that all our officers know and understand and guide their actions based on this. So we have it on the back of our police cars, and every day when I think about what I'm doing, I'm trying to make sure that I do everything that's on that list. So all my actions are those 5 statements. So it's important to us, and we hope that that comes through in how we show ourselves to the community. So we appreciate this opportunity to be here tonight and solicit input and receive feedback, because this is part of our focus on the importance of the community and how we fulfill our mission of delivering effective public safety service. So in the interest of transparency and disclosing as much information as we're able to regarding these cameras, we have created the digital system FAQ and posted on our website, and it contains additional information which has brought forth a lot of robust discussions on the subject. So if you have the opportunity, I'm sure we will drop the link to that in the chat. And if I forget later, I have it queued up so I can always do that. So tonight, I'll be speaking broadly about the role that cameras and the South Orange Police Department play in our public safety environment. So regarding the purpose of the cameras, I'll start out saying that over time, we all see technology has become more advanced and more integrated into our personal and professional lives. And we can see this in the ubiquity of all the devices and programs available, which we can perform multitudes of tasks and allow us to perform better work with limited resources. So we also see this in the general expectations of what law enforcement is able to accomplish through technology. So the use of recorded video has been a part of police investigations for many years in numerous capacities. We are required to use cameras in police cars when conducting interviews, and soon we'll be having body-worn cameras on our officers. So we have experience and a knowledge infrastructure in place for proper use of cameras and video recordings for law enforcement purposes. We've found that cameras have been a benefit not only to our processes, but also the most important people in them, those that have been impacted by incidents that affect their lives and the lives of their loved ones. So when incidents occur that need investigation, one of the requirements is that we attempt to identify and review any recordings that may contain evidence to help determine facts. When we don't have access to public cameras, we have to rely on footage that's really private property. So while we have and will continue to work cooperatively with owners of private cameras, as public servants, we also strive to make improvement in our service. A publicly owned camera system operated by the police lets investigators use their time more efficiently, allows for more complete investigations, and leads to more successful investigations. Having public safety cameras available as a tool lets police perform additional fact-finding and bolsters the investigative process. One example of what they're capable of is helping an investigator more rapidly confirm descriptions of vehicles or people involved in incidents and rule out those that don't even need to be considered for investigation. This is a focused rather than overly broad investigation in which we're able to continue to honor and abide by constitutional principles, particularly those of the Fourth Amendment. Cameras can help investigators connect the dots and explore additional avenues of inquiry as they use their training, experience, and judgment during a full investigation. Because we're always seeking to do the right thing for the community, and conducting successful investigations is something that is not only expected of us, but that we also expect of ourselves. So when those investigations are able to connect a person to their actions and hold them accountable, it results in better outcomes for individuals and the community as a whole. It's my hope that we can do our part in bringing about justice for those that need it. So South Orange Police Department has a place and a role in the larger ecosystem of law enforcement in the community. And we understand that for us to be effective in delivering positive outcomes, we have to adhere to one of the most fundamental concepts that are instilled in officers and police organizations, and that we do operate within a rigorous system. Our actions and decisions are made within a framework of laws, directives, guidelines, regulations, and rules established by various entities at all levels of government, as well as the expectations of the community on how they want their police department to interact with them. For police, we have a clear chain of command with state law enforcement officers such as the Attorney General at the top, to the Essex County Prosecutor having direct authority over all police agencies in the county, to our local elected leaders providing oversight and collaborating on establishing a vision for local public safety priorities, such as what's currently being done in South Orange with the development of the Community Care and Justice Program. So we take our lead from these entities and we follow their guidance when they provide us in numerous areas, such as which helped inform the development of our current policy on the usage of the camera system. Leading up to the authorization for investigators to use the system, we conducted policy research and outreach to other law enforcement agencies. We were unable to find public safety camera use policies from other agencies similar to our size. And when we did locate a policy from a large agency, it encompassed resources, structure, and usage that were just not in the scope of our needs in this community. So we used a basic framework provided by the example and crafted a camera use policy that was feasible for this department and that abides by existing Attorney General regulations, which we are unable to preempt. So as we go forward in this process, there will be a robust feedback and conversations. We'll want to incorporate community feedback as we're able, and we will also seek legal advice as we go forward. So that's really what I have to say from a broad scope, a bird's eye view of the subject. And I'll able to turn the floor over to our next speaker. And I'd like to thank everyone here for participating tonight and express that your input is vital and appreciated as we move forward. Thank you. So Donna, do we have our next speaker? You're muted.
Thank you, Acting Chief. Our next speaker is actually Village President Collum, and she has informed me that she's running a little bit late. So I did want to touch on one point, Acting Chief, that we can go back to here, which is just talking a little bit about the crime trends in the village and how it relates to your use of cameras to date. And I'm going to put that slide up here. Here you go.
Okay, so what we have is a graph that reflects an average of the monthly serious crime information that have occurred in South Orange. Right now, this is the FBI's Uniform Crime Report, Part 1 crimes, and you can see that what they include over in that box on the right-hand side. So this shows that in 2018, 2019, there was a typical amount of monthly Part 1 incidents in South Orange, and we see that in 2020 and 2021, we have a lower amount. That overall, our documentation of general calls for service and illegal activity are lower in 2020 and the first half of 2021. However, our expectation is that with the loosening of COVID restrictions that came with the recent end of the governor's emergency orders, those numbers will return to levels that are more typical of pre-COVID times. As our world starts to normalize bit by bit, we begin to slowly return to the way life looked prior to COVID-19. We also have to recognize that those that choose not to abide by the same laws that we do are also normalizing, and crime rates can return to typical pre-COVID levels that we see in the earlier years. So we have seen through our experiences with our partners in the justice system that camera recordings are a critical element of the picture for both the prosecutor's office when they build cases and the courts in determining outcomes as they fulfill their duties to do what's best for people that are victimized by criminal activities. So we don't have our crime statistics come in after the end of each month, so we report on previous months. At our monthly Health and Public Safety Committee meeting, in August, I'll be giving July's numbers, and we'll see what that reflects there. I don't necessarily want to speak anecdotally about what's been going on lately, but we have returned to nicer weather, summertime. People are getting out and about more, and we here at the police department are more busy with the things that we have to do on a daily basis. So, I'm happy to give more information when I have that available. And I expect as we continue on the trend of returning to normalcy, that we will all other things that we may not necessarily like may return to normal as well. So,
yeah. And I would also add, as we're going to learn in a little bit more detail with Sergeant Lombardi, that we also use these cameras with motor vehicle crashes, correct, to lay out facts and clarity around those scenes. So that data will come later on in the presentation. So we will share some of that. And at this point, I believe Madam President has joined the meeting, and so I'm going to turn it over to Village President Sheena Collum. If you could unmute yourself and start your video, we are ready for you.
Trustee Collier, can you see me okay?
I can indeed. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for being here. Sorry, I had another village meeting that I was just at. I see that we have a lot of participants on. And so I first have to always start by saying thank you so much by being engaged in this process. So one thing I want to say about the Board of Trustees in general and the work of the South Orange Police Department is so much of the work that we're doing right now is geared and driven by the residents here. It has been a really tough few years really trying to reimagine and think about policing and what we expect about public safety as it relates to health, de-escalation, race relations. These are really complex topics. And I first want to acknowledge people who come to these type of sessions with an open mind and an open heart and a true dialogue, because there's so much gray area when we talk about policing. I know that Trustee Collier has taken her video off, but her in particular, as the chair of our Health and Public Safety Committee, has gone above and beyond in initiating our Community Care and Justice Initiative with Dr. Rios, who I know is joining us, supported by our acting chief, Steve Dolanak. In the way that we reimagine policing in general. And that's a big initiative. In this partnership between South Orange, Seton Hall, and Essex County, we have close to $300,000 that we're investing in techniques that aren't traditional law enforcement, but the way that our community has told us that they want to think about public safety. So I first have to do a big shout out and gratitude to my colleague, Trustee Collier, the members of the Board of Trustees, and a police department that really listens to the community and tries to, that's my radio going off. I'll be right back real quick. They're going on calls as we speak right now. Tonight is really important because, Don, if we can go to the next slide, I just want to kind of share with people where we are so that we manage expectations about why you're here and that nothing is ever baked. When government tells you it's a done deal, never is there a situation where something is a fully done deal. As we learn and we grow and we exchange ideas together, we always try and find whatever that right balance is between people who might be on one side of the issue versus other side. So where we are is last year is that in our draft capital budget, we allocated money to upgrade our public safety cameras. As you'll hear later on in the presentation, public safety cameras are found all throughout New Jersey in every single community. In residential neighborhoods, you have people who utilize Ring. The difference this time around is when we were looking at the upgrades, and we learned later on, is that there is so much advanced technology out there, and the role of that technology integration in law enforcement raised a lot of concerns from people. I will have to give a shout out to Ben, who I know is joining us tonight, and allowed us to kind of reimagine and rethink some of the things that we were doing. We really don't get to the granular scale of what the technology that we deploy. We just know that we need to make a capital investment for upgrades. So our camera system has existed for close to 2 decades, maybe a little bit less. And so the question now is, what do we expect out of public safety cameras? I will also note that as a part of general policy and direction, you have seen from our municipal budget that the largest allocation goes to police and fire. So with policing, is when we had a report done and commissioned for the South Orange community. It was before I was on the Board of Trustees. It was under a prior administration, prior Board of Trustees, is we looked at really connecting the number of officers we have to our calls for service and how integration of technology and good scheduling and matching our data with deployment of our officers would make us more efficient, but just as important, would also make us more financially solvent when we look at policing. So at the high peak of South Orange, our department had 57 officers. And right now we are operating with a table of organization of 45 officers. So there has, I never use the term defund the police because I find that not to actually be productive, but matching expectations of the community, responses to the community with the staffing that we have. And technology has been a really, really large part of the way that we've been able to manage that staffing level with new technologies. If you go even further back, something as simple as mobile data terminals, where our officers now can do things from their vehicles, used to be a time when they would have to go back to headquarters, be taken out of service, and would be typing up reports, right? So technology in a lot of instances have not only made our department more efficient, but has allowed them to also to get back onto proactive patrols in directed areas where citizens have concerns and would like them to be responding to. So where we are right now is that we had the allocation to upgrade our camera system. The second component of it is that things are vetted, right? Our budget just doesn't happen in a vacuum. In fact, we're having this dialogue because someone actually saw our department heads present different aspects of the budget that was ultimately approved. That does not bind us to anything in particular. What it says is that we have a money allocation that we're anticipating. And when we decided to put a pause on it, which we did after we heard comments and concerns from the residents, is where we are today right now. So we allocated money. Money doesn't have to be spent. There can always be change orders, but that's what this community meeting is for about right now. And what Trustee Collier has been working on is, so essentially we said, we're going to put the brakes on. We see that there's interest from the community. Let's talk about some of these policies, these pros, these cons, these trade-offs in the way that we implement technology in our community. And I will close by saying that I think the most important thing is for us to listen to each other in a productive way. We have advocates on one side who talk about kind of the detriment, and I agree with the facial detection or technology that harms certain marginalized groups of people. And that's certainly not the values of the South Orange community. That would never be. That is the antithesis of what we want for our community. But then on the other side is that we do have crime. We have part one crimes, which you likely heard are the quote unquote serious crimes, but I'd also like to say that there's no such thing as a victimless crime. We also have thefts. Probably about 10 years ago, my car was broken into and somebody stole a camera. I didn't care about the camera, but I did care about the SD card. And with not facial detection, but with object detection, when people feel violated by their home either being broken into or their vehicle being vandalized or broken into, is that this technology can help advance justice for those people as well. So when we think in a holistic view of the types of crime that happen in South Orange, and I thank God every day that it is in a reasonable amount. And because we have such dedicated law enforcement, a lot of the things that they do help solve crime. But these are additional measures, there are additional technologies, there are additional investments that may produce better outcomes for all members of our community. So as we kick off tonight, I just want to thank everyone. Let's keep the discussion respectful, because that's what I love about our town is we can always disagree without being disagreeable, and acknowledge that we're coming together for the betterment of each and every resident and guest and visitor and students who come into the South Orange community. So with that said, thank you so much, Trustee Collier. I'm looking forward to tonight and the engagement of all of our residents.
Thank you, Madam President. That was super helpful, and we're so glad that you're so supportive of these initiatives, and most importantly, so supportive of the dialogue. Next up is a bit of a Q&A between Trustee Bobby Brown and a couple of folks from our, our village offices, and one from our village offices, IT, Director Stan Wilkinson, another Sergeant Rich Lombardi, who I shared earlier has been super involved in pulling together all this information around the cameras. Bobby too is running just a little bit late, so I'm going to take us through something quickly, and then we'll get back to Bobby and his Q&A. I wanted to kind of frame our how we're looking at this decision. Some of you know I have a strategy and consulting background, and it's kind of showing on this slide, so I apologize. I'm going to try to break it down into like real life. So as Madam President mentioned, it is a goal of our public safety program to reduce crime and to get to the bottom of motor vehicle crashes. And so we have a goal where we'd like to have a high degree of clarity around the scenes where these activities take place. The opposite of that is if we're not doing our job, we're not meeting our goals, we don't have that clarity. In this screen, it's hiding, at least in my view, a little bit of the right-hand side here. But what you see is that our decision today literally is a decision between a high-tech touch to accomplish that goal using the cameras or some form of cameras versus a lower tech touch where we have more human involvement. And what you see on this screen is that there certainly is value associated with a high tech touch. We find in our courts of law that the prosecutors are more effective when they have video that shows what happened at a scene, whether it's a crime or a crash that elevates to the level of a crime, and sometimes they do. We know that, automation is faster and more efficient than humans in a lot of ways. And we know that, automation can be a 24/7 presence, it's sort of like the opposite of, there's no fatigue in automation as long as the equipment is kept up and maintained. Now, of course, there's downside with that high-tech touch. Madam President talked about the bias that can exist, and specifically, in facial recognition programs, for example, or in where the cameras are placed and who in the community feels like they are being viewed by the cameras. There's also the garbage in, garbage out theory, and that is if we put the cameras in the wrong place and they don't capture our motor vehicle crashes and or some of the high crime sites, they won't be doing their job. We mentioned the privacy concerns, and also, what's come in and out of discussion in our community outreach to date is, concerns around security leaks. And so, how do we control that? On the other side of the equation, if you look up at the upper right box, you naturally have human judgment and contextual assessment that comes with human judgment, which brings a lot of value to the table. And in fact, we'll learn more, but it can counterbalance some of these risks that we're talking about. For example, New Jersey state law, the AG guidelines that we've been talking about says that we're not allowed to charge somebody with a crime just on the basis of this video that gets captured. There has to be corroborating evidence, and Sergeant Lombardi is going to tell us a little bit more about that. There's judgment to be applied and where to place these cameras. We're going to talk a little bit more about mapping that we have available to us, both for motor vehicle crashes and for our serious crimes. And that helps in the process of determining where to place these cameras. So, this is a very typical, very polarized decision. We've had a lot of input on both sides of this framework that we're looking at here. And the trick is to balance getting the maximum amount of value with with the least amount of risk, and certainly with appropriate levels of investment in our community from a financial perspective. So I wanted to share that because I think it's important that you understand that our decision is not driven by somebody's pet project or somebody the loudest voice in the room necessarily. We're using this process today, and we're using that input form to get lots of ideas about how to balance out these risks, how to approach this decision, because more brains are always more powerful than one or two or even three or four or however many are involved. But this is how we're going to frame the decision so that you can picture the process going forward, and certainly subject to the constraints that we laid out that have to deal with working in an environment like ours where the state attorney general is so specific in terms of what policing policy has to look like. With that, I'm gonna go back now. I don't know if Trustee Brown is with us yet, but I'm actually gonna start the Q&A with Sergeant Lombardi and Director Wilkinson. And so I'm going to ask the two of you to go ahead and open up your screens and unmute your microphones.
How's everybody doing? Sergeant Lombardi here. First and foremost, I just want to thank Trustee Collier for putting this all together and working diligently behind the scenes with everybody. Obviously working with the CPC, Village President Collum, and Acting Chief Dolanek. I'm very pleased to be here tonight.
Thank you for coming, and right back at you both. You've both been so helpful in getting all the diligence together that we need to help people to understand what we're doing on the ground.
And I'm Stan Wilkinson, and very happy to be here. And again, I'll mirror everything said by Sergeant Lombardi.
Thank you. I'm going to actually put my screen back up because I feel like the three of us are still up here, and it helps a little bit with the visual. We are recording, by the way, so that we can hopefully post this out in the virtual world for those that were not able to attend. And I would also ask Neris to please give us a heads up when Trustee Brown is able to join. So the first question, and I think you both have a part to play in answering it, that I wanted to address is one related to security. And so, first of all, the way I think about that is how secure is our network overall? And second, how do we control access so that we don't lose or leak information via access problems? So I'm going to ask Director Wilkinson to address that first question for us, if you could.
Well, when you say the network, are you referring to the camera network or to our police network, the internal computer systems? Because they are completely separate.
Yes, I think it's a little bit of both, right? Certainly the camera network is an important feature here, but to the extent that we download information from that camera network into our PD network, it's important to speak to both.
Okay, well, as far as the cameras themselves go, the access and actually Rich, Sergeant Lombardi could actually speak better on that. Though the camera system itself is locked down to only a select few, as far as who's able to access it, who's able to view, who's able to make any type of changes or to download video. As far as our computer network itself goes, that's a whole nother story. We keep everything that possible to CJIS regulations. We periodically test for ourselves to see if there's ways to intrude on the network or to breach. And we just do our best to keep everything locked down about as solid as possible.
Fantastic. And I'm going to let Sergeant Lombardi talk in a little bit more detail about access. And then I do see that Trustee Brown has joined us, so I'm going to turn off my mic and my camera and let him jump into the fray here. Please, Sergeant Lombardi.
Okay, so just kind of looping around, because you said I would add a little bit about the access to the cameras. As mentioned earlier, we have a policy as to the type of users that can access the camera system. They're broken into two groups. There's site administrators, and that encompasses all of the supervisory administrative staff at the police department. Example, that's your chief of police, your captain, your investigative lieutenants, and your administrative sergeants. Also in that site administrator group, and again, dictated by policy, are your detectives. They're conducting investigations. So that single group of site administrators, they're empowered to make changes to user privileges on the back end. They can also view live video. They can go back through the historical record of video to pull up incidents that we might be investigating that have been reported to us, such as motor vehicle crashes. And they can also archive that video. So that's the one type of group that we have, the site administrator. The second type of group that we have is called our tour commander. To make it very simple, that is all of our frontline patrol supervisors. Those are our patrol lieutenants and our patrol sergeants. The reason why they both have access to the system is because due to their responsibilities, their job roles are interchangeable. Lieutenants are entitled to take a vacation when they're not in. Sergeant could come in, work the desk on their assigned shift, and they have to be able to look at the live video. If an incident happens downtown, we have cameras downtown, officers start responding there. It's good for that sergeant or that lieutenant working the desk to look up. They do not have the privileges to review historic footage. They cannot archive footage. Their role is basically just a live feed, and they keep that live feed up in their peripheral within communications.
Thank you for that, Sergeant Lombardi. Most times interviews start with the interviewer, the first question, but we'll adjust as needed. Sorry, I'm a little bit late from football practice, but I did want to ask a follow-up question. Thank you for the explanation. And the follow-up question is simply, how do we make sure that the facial recognition is what the technology is called? Is that how you say that?
So there's facial recognition, and then, as has been published in local media, our new system utilizes something called facial detection.
Facial detection. Okay.
Okay.
Thank
So
you for that. So,
Yeah.
so my question is about the facial detection. How do we ensure as a community, there is a lot of concern around protecting against bias with that facial detection. And I would just ask sort of, how do we as a community or as a police department ensure that there is no bias as it pertains to that technology?
So the facial detection as it's used in the Verkada system, we're using that basically to get images of individuals that are caught in the commission of either a crime or are under investigation for some reason. Okay, we're looking at video, and that tool within Verkada is basically just allowing us to pinpoint, to take snapshots for use in investigations later. We're not using that to file any charges. We're not using that for any other purpose than for our detectives to go through that historic footage and locate individuals. The bigger question, which I know shows up with facial recognition in a traditional sense, which we have used here for approximately 2 decades. Almost every single law enforcement agency in the state of New Jersey uses facial recognition as directed by the Attorney General. We have internal training that we do because the systems are very complex. Okay, to eliminate bias, we have our own internal training. That training is a proficiency as how the systems work to eliminate the system giving us a probable match. Okay, we're using human judgment when identifying somebody. Now, we're not, again, using that as a sole means for charging an individual. That is one component in an investigation. We're still using forensics, video footage, witness statements, victim statements, DNA if it's available, et cetera, et cetera. That is just one small piece of a total complete investigation. And that's how we're ensuring that we don't have bias when using these new sophisticated types of systems.
Okay. Maybe along those same lines, but as opposed to not necessarily the facial detection, but in terms of placement. Like, how are we deciding where the cameras will be placed? And I guess it's a technical version of the same question, right? So people concerned about whether or not there is opportunity for bias might also be concerned about the placement of the cameras. So I would ask, what are those decisions like? How are they being made? And will there be sort of a litmus test as to whether or not the placement of the cameras is indeed one that is made in good judgment?
So I see that Trustee Collier has presented the motor vehicle crash heat map. Okay, I just want everybody to look at this for a second and see that the red areas that are turning almost orange in the center are areas that we have high incidence of motor vehicle crashes. As it goes out to the blue, it's less frequency.
Mm-hmm.
What you're seeing on that map right there is South Orange Avenue and our county roads. Okay, we're using these crash maps, which are based off of reports that we've taken of crashes within our jurisdiction. We have similar data for crime mapping, as well as what our detectives describe as blind spots. So we have an investigation, crime occurs, whether it's a crime or a crash, doesn't really matter, but there's some type of investigation. And our guys have gone out there and canvassed and said, this is a blind spot. You know, we could have made progress with this case that is now cold because we have no eyes out there. We have no other evidence. And we cannot understate how important video evidence is, particularly to our Essex County jurors who are very educated and understand what they're looking at in videos. So that's what really is making our determination, those 3 things. Our own detectives reporting back where they need these resources to better serve our community, the crime data and the crash map data. And if you look at this map, you know, some of the camera locations have been reported. They're being placed in those hot zones right there.
Okay. And I do see there's a very spirited chat going on. I don't know if we're answering. I don't know how Trustee Collier is doing that, but I just want to know, as I hear it in theory, I can wrestle through what it looks like. I can hear about how you protect, who has access to protection against bias with the facial detection and the placement of the cameras. Could you just give me like some beyond theory, some actual examples of case use studies of where these have been used and how they've been used, so people can take from theory to in practice what it looks like with actual case studies.
Okay, so I have two case studies, one that's criminal and one that's motor vehicle. I'm going to bring everybody back to May 23rd, 2020. At approximately 2:38, and Trustee Collier's put up the little write-up I did here, but approximately 2:38 in front of the Chase Bank, that's 8 South Orange Avenue, so people have a visual idea of where that was. We had an individual approach a minivan and commit a carjacking. We had township cameras there. The SOPD detectives were able to track the suspect's movements, and through a combination of public and private cameras, they were able to identify the offender. This ultimately led to us being able to effect an arrest, file criminal charges, which were approved by the Essex County Prosecutor's Office because they had to review this because it was a serious crime. We're talking about carjacking here. And most importantly, we had town footage and private footage that showed the actual incident occurred. So we were able to retain this evidence, this footage that was evidence for prosecution. So, I mean, that's basically in a nutshell how amazing having cameras, especially in our hotspots, is, because we can not only identify an actor, but we can actually get the commission of the crime caught on camera. Trustee Kohler, if you don't mind putting up the motor vehicle crash slide. So this investigation is a little close to me because I actually responded to this scene. So my eyes were out there. April 24th, it was a Saturday morning at about 7:18 in the morning, a serious motor vehicle crash occurred. A minivan, which we would later find out was traveling at a high rate of speed, impacted a barrier. For people in town, it's those big planters that are across the street from Seton Hall University by that wedge-shaped building, 525. Officers arrived, multiple occupants injured on scene. And frankly, when the officers showed up on scene, because we had a car turned over on its side, we had multiple injured individuals, wasn't really clear as to what happened. A crash of this severity required the notification of the Essex County Prosecutor's Office. They came out. We had one of our crash reconstructions come out. Wasn't readily apparent exactly what led up to this crash, even though we would later work through our normal process of determining how a crash occurred. What happened? So we had one of our new cameras, as well as the Seton Hall camera, which gave us, thankfully, a virtually 360-degree view of the crash scene. And there were certain things that were revealed from that footage that shed light on the crash, how it occurred. Speeds traveled. It actually told us who was operating the vehicle. Because, you know, you have a serious crash like that, who's operating? What did this ultimately lead to? Well, once our guys did their investigation, once the prosecutor's office did their investigation, we had the video. It corroborated everything that they had determined. They were able to verify that through video evidence, and ultimately led to motor vehicle and criminal charges filed against the driver of that vehicle for basically breaking motor vehicle law and also causing substantial injuries to her passengers.
Got it. I need to, my glasses are messing me up, but thank you for sharing this. I can't read all of it, but thanks for sharing this. But to see how it's used in the real world is helpful. I know that, and I'll just ask generally for those who are participating in the digital visual system, our virtual discussion, you were very responsive to me when I was the chair of Community Police Collaborative, and I appreciate it. To those who would like to not only chat here, but get in touch and ask any questions, I know we've got our FAQs. Any other ways that we can just build a bridge for people to ask more questions? I'm looking at all the chats and obviously there are more questions. What ways could people follow up to ask more questions? Best ways for you?
Yeah, I want to jump in and answer that one, Bobby. Apologies for those of you that are in the chat that are looking for us to respond. I'm actually a lot not good at multitasking. And so I haven't even looked at the chat. So I apologize. What I will tell you is that we can save the chat. We will look at your communications that are coming through the chat and, kind of try to collate them out with the rest of the policy recommendations that we are recording through our input form. I'd encourage you to use that input form when you want to share something, sort of more officially than the chat, because it just is it's another piece of technology, right? It gives me all the information that goes from that Google input form is going to get dropped into a spreadsheet. We'll be able to collate it, sort it, and digest it a little bit more easily than having to go one by one through items in a chat. So I would encourage you to take some of that discussion into that input form. And I want to thank Trustee Brown and Director Wilkinson and Sergeant Lombardi for sharing a little bit of the detail from the FAQ page. Those of you that want to get more information can go there. There's many more questions that are laid out on that FAQ page. And that is a perfect segue into our next segment. And so I'm going to thank you all and ask you to go ahead and mute and turn off your screens. And I'm going to take us now into a description of how we're going to do the breakout rooms. We did that. So in the breakout rooms, we're going to gather some information that'll be helpful for us. And we're going to ask you to use that input form to record your input from those breakout sessions. So if you haven't found that input form in the chat yet, we'll put it right back in there again momentarily. But here's the questions, and then I'll go into a little bit as to how we're going to format the breakout room. We're going to do a lightning round question in the beginning to say, based on what you've heard so far, based on different forums that you might have been in and talked about the camera program, based on what you've learned if you're new to all of this in this session, do a lightning round and share anything that you'd like to see us add to the FAQ. Don't worry about checking it to make sure it's not already there. We will do that part, but just use that lightning round to go around the room and say, well, I'd like to know more about this. I'd like to know more about that. The next. Hey, Mr.
Donna,
how are you? Nice.
Hi, I'm good.
You.
You too. Thanks for organizing this, and thanks for everyone that spoke. Quite a few members of the public.
To hold off for a second while I finish introducing the breakout rooms. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much. The next question in the breakout rooms is going to go into much more detail. We're going to talk about different views and concerns in those breakout rooms. And we're going to do the breakout room assignments fairly randomly. So hopefully you all will have the ability to, to share and hear different views and concerns about how these systems are deployed. And so that will likely be the meat of the breakout room, so to speak. And then finally, the third question, again, more of a lightning round. Where would you like to see policy focus? Is there an aspect of policy that we have not discussed yet that you'd like to see addressed? Helpful for us to know that, because I'll tell you that we're getting lots of good policy suggestions through the various forums, and we're hoping to get more here. Just a little bit more about how these breakout rooms are going to work.
Donna, why does it have to be a breakout room when you only have 30 members who would like to share this all together? Why are you going to separate us now when we just listen to a PowerPoint for 58 minutes?
Gosh, I don't even know how to respond, except to say that we thought it would be helpful to get into smaller groups. Not at all. And have
It's not helpful at all. That's why we're all in the chat room, because we want to talk together, not separately.
The breakout rooms are a great idea, but a lot of people came here tonight. Small group discussion is really excellent. But I think a lot of people came here tonight. We've heard one side of the story from the town and the police. Thank you for all your work. That was helpful. But many people came tonight expecting to have a chance to address the community and address all the people that are listening. And this is a bit of a surprise.
Well, if I could just finish. So the reason why we wanted to have breakout rooms is because smaller discussions are sometimes easier. I mean, there are 30 people in this room. There is going to be opportunity for people and individual from each of the breakout rooms to come back at the end and share what the tenor of the breakout room was, and to share views as you all are describing and asking for. So we do have that set up after people have had a chance to kind of share ideas and talk with each other a little bit in a smaller.
And after the police have had 60 minutes to make their case. When does the community get to make its case?
Exactly.
To everybody.
It's going to be filtered by a report that will be shared from the breakout session. That is not democratic. It is not inclusive. And the way you have set up this meeting is designed not to really hear the opinions of the citizens. There are 30 people on this call, and we have a right to voice our opinions among 30 of us.
So why not limit it to 1 minute of public comment per person? That'll take 30 minutes.
That would take 30 minutes, 1 minute. Everybody gets 60 seconds.
I think that's fair.
Well, why don't we all put up our hands and see how many we've got? Who wants to speak in the public? I think the town and the trustees and the police have already had 60. So I'm not sure they really need much more time, although I would like dialogue. I would like to hear their response to what we have to say, but.
Actually, if you wouldn't mind, wouldn't mind responding to, because I've seen that there's a lot going on with the Verkada hack that you're referring to. And that was.
Before you jump in, Director Wilkinson, let me just say that I'm happy to modify the format, and I'm happy to ask people to raise their hands, and then we'll kind of go through and do, a couple minutes each, like we would at a trustee meeting. At a trustee meeting, we would limit the time of each speaker to 3 minutes. We'll go ahead and do that unless we have more hands. If we need to make the time shorter because we have more hands, we will. And with that, I'll take a breath. I'll let Director Wilkinson go ahead and share what you wanted to about what you're seeing in the chat about Verkada security, and then we'll move to the new format. And I would also say, for those of you who are shy about a public forum and don't feel comfortable public speaking in this forum, that input form is there for you. Definitely feel free to use it, and let's see where we go. Apologies if you thought I was trying to silence people. I really just thought the smaller groups would be easier to have actual conversations versus something else. I'm not sure, versus what we're doing here.
Trustee Collier, this is Summer. Yes. I would suggest, just like trustee meetings, everyone needs to raise their hand that would like to talk by using the reactions. There shouldn't be people over talking everyone. And then I can do the timing if you would like. That's
perfect. Thank you. And also, before we move on, I want to just go through our P's and Q's. Please turn on your cameras if you're comfortable. It just helps us feel more like a community and helps us to get to know each other better. Please share personal stories to the extent that you have them. Please stay open-minded and respectful. We are not going to all agree. We know that. As Trustee Jones explained, make sure that you don't talk over somebody else, one person talking at a time. Let's take a breath between people. Also, this is the biggest one on this page for me. Assume good intentions. Nobody here is a bad actor. Everybody here is well-intentioned. We all have similar goals around keeping our community safe and making sure that we don't have inherent bias or inherent surveillance, privacy invasion in our community. We all have these same goals. We're all well-intentioned. Please bear that in mind. Some of the dialogue has implied otherwise, and I think it's really super unfair to the people that have been involved in this program. I think that's it. And Director Wilkinson, do you want to talk about the Verkada before we start?
I mean, just something real quick. From what because this was a little while back, and from what I remember of it, it allowed people to view cameras. It didn't allow people to make changes to or download anything in particular. Again, the permissions were still in place. They were doing a rollout on a newer portion of the system, and there was a vulnerability. They had since closed that. Keep in mind, every time Microsoft does an update, the reason why they're doing their updates is to do a patch. Sony has been hacked. Any number of companies have been hacked. I mean, literally hacked, and had stuff stolen. People's phones from their iCloud are having their information downloaded regularly. This is not the situation that happened. People were able to view, but they were not able to steal or make changes. And again, everything on all of those, any vulnerability, any way to breach into the system had been closed. So it is a secure system, and we are still waiting for ourselves to get just to follow through, make sure that everything is, we're getting all of our reports from them to make sure that everything is monitored and checked on a regular basis to keep this from happening again.
All right, that's very much appreciated. Thank you. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Vitale. Welcome.
Thanks, Donna. Are people able to hear me now?
We hear you, Ben. Go ahead, Mr. Vitale, speak.
Thanks. So thanks for everybody for speaking and the opportunity to speak to everybody. I'd love to have smaller discussions at another time. So I had 2 or 3 quickly prepared remarks, and then I just want to rebut some things that some other people said, which I'll do that first. So first of all, sure, yes, we have cameras in other towns in New Jersey. Most of those cameras don't have face recognition or internet access. The police department and the trustees have not justified why we need to have face recognition and internet access in this system. Also, there wasn't a lot of dialogue about the build out of any of the surveillance across our country, and this is becoming ubiquitous, and the public is starting to push back. And what's happening in our town right now is not unusual. This is happening all across the country, and it is appropriate, that we have these conversations and reconsider whether it's just obvious that the police can hang up some cameras in the town and what technology they should have. And there hasn't been a lot of discussion of that this evening. There was a brief mention of the Fourth Amendment, but the overall framework, of the surveillance state's developing country, we haven't really talked about that very much. We've really just talked about crime prevention. And it's really important to remember that research shows that public surveillance cameras do not deter violent crime. Okay, I understand they can help with investigations, but the evidence is from the police and from the academics They don't deter violent crime. So we're giving up a lot of civil liberties for a fairly small convenience for the police. Okay, so we've talked about, well, we've had cameras in town for decades, but the thing is, those were different kind of cameras and we didn't have this modern technology, and there wasn't much discussion about when we hung them up, as I mentioned. So this reassurance isn't really very helpful to us. What we need to talk about now is whether we want more cameras and whether we want cameras with these high-tech features. It's very concerning for civil liberties advocates when high technology, and you had a couple slides about this, gets combined with surveillance and crime prevention. That is precisely the thing we're concerned about. Okay, so the second rebuttal point is that Sergeant Lombardi was talking about face detection. He's been talking about, the department's been talking about this for a long time. In the Village Green, we said, no, we don't have face recognition, we only have face detection. The FAQ that you posted, which was very helpful, thank you to the department and to Donna and the Public Safety Committee for putting that together. It's extensive, I really appreciate it. Talks about these exact features. The Verkada system has people analytics, it has person history and face search. And now the department is saying it wants to use all these features when, a month ago,
There's 30 seconds left, sorry.
They even existed. And we haven't heard a justification of why we need these features. Okay, the 2 points I wanted to get into. First of all, there's really two issues here. Do we want police
Mr.
cameras at
Vitale,
all?
you're at your 3 minutes. And just to be fair for everyone, if you want to just finish, I'll give you 1 more minute. I actually added another minute, so I'll give you 1 more minute and then we just have to move to the rest of the people, okay?
Well, I'll put in the chat my website, which has the comments, really all the things that I want to say. I wanted to read you one of those comments. It's 300 words long. It's called Justice for Musa. And I'm sure that's something that's on everybody's mind, but I'll save that later, after everyone else has had a chance to speak. Thank you for everybody. Thank you to everybody for listening.
Sophie K, whoever the name that's on there, I'm going to start your 3 minutes as soon as you start speaking.
Hi, Sophie is my sister. I'm Elijah Cushion, a longtime resident of South Orange. I had 2 questions. One, on the FAQ and on the actual policy paper, you referenced that only authorized personnel will be able to access this footage. Can you give us a specific number of people that will have access to this footage, because that's not provided? And I'll say my second question quickly, just to keep things moving. There's been a lot of talk about Verkada being hacked. I'm wondering how much access will Verkada have to archival footage from these cameras? Facial recognition, at least modern facial recognition driven by AI, relies on large data sets of people's faces to train itself so it can better recognize faces. Will Verkada have access to footage from South Orange cameras? Will it be used to train their AI? And what specific, steps are in place to protect civil liberties of people who maybe don't want their personal biometric information shared with Verkada? Thank you.
Thanks.
Trustee Collier, do you want the questions answered now, or do you want the answers to come at the end, similar to the Board of Trustees meeting where it happens at the end?
The latter. I think we've sort of adopted the Board of Trustee format. And so let's just catalog the questions and then I'll try to feed them out to the right people to answer and or beg for a little more time for diligence if we don't know the answers.
Okay, and then if I can add, I see in the chat that everyone is yielding their minute to Ben. Because we do want this to be a community discussion, we will circle back to Ben. So if you do want to talk, please do not yield your minute to Ben. We will make sure, I'm sorry, Mr. Vitale, we will make sure that he has a moment at the end, but we definitely think that everyone, and Mr. Vitale has also said the same thing, that you should all speak because it is a community discussion. And so again, we're going to move on to Mr. Goldberg.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Very good. Thank you very much. Sitting outside on this lovely summer night, so hopefully you can see me. So first I want to thank the Board of Trustees and South Orange Police Department for having this meeting. I appreciate the open dialogue and the forum. As many of you know, I was a member of the Board of Trustees for 6 years, and for those 6 years, I was also the Public Safety Chair. And in that role, I got to work very closely with the police department and can say firsthand that they are simply the best that there is. The men and women of the South Orange Police Department are fantastic. The one challenge I always had with the police, however, is that they always want more people. They always want more people and more resources. And as any of us as taxpayers know, our taxes are obscene, right? We're all bearing the burden of our insane taxes, and we have limited financial resources. So using technology to supplement our existing officers is a cost-effective and common sense solution. They can always use more technology, which is far more cost-effective than more people. I'm just stunned at the opposition to such a simple solution that exists everywhere across the country, across the world. You go to any city, any town, any airport, any courtroom, anywhere, right? There are cameras. Anytime you leave your house, it's a sad reality of the world we live in. There's just no expectation of privacy when you leave your house. There's private security cameras, there's public cameras, Ring doorbells, the video camera that's in everyone's cell phone. You can and you will be recorded. We all wish that didn't exist. We all wish there wasn't crime. The reality is, it is just the reality. And in my opinion, having cameras is not something to be feared. As the old adage goes, don't do the crime if you can't do the time. Just behave as a proper citizen. There's no reason to fear the cameras. As was talked about earlier, the village is in the process of adding body cameras to help protect our police officers. And now we're talking about adding additional security cameras to help further protect the residents. South Orange is not immune to crime, as we all unfortunately know. We have our fair share of crime, and the police need the tools available to them to help solve those crimes. There's been a lot of really horrid crimes in recent weeks, right? The awful murder, the carjacking, the shootings in Maplewood, and having additional cameras could potentially solve those crimes. That's what we all want, right? We're all citizens of the same community, and we want to live here safely and peacefully. The police are here to protect us. We're paying enormous taxes to have them protect us, and they need the tools and resources to do so. I think that's really all I've got. I know I'm probably running out of time here. I would
3 seconds.
All right, I'll just wrap there. But thank you. I appreciate the time and the consideration.
Thank you for that.
Miss Ryan?
Hey, so I was a part of the CPC subcommittee that reviewed policy to provide a recommendation to our trustees, and I just wanted to very briefly summarize our main objections or concerns, and then I'll post our review document in the chat. So our concerns fell into 3 main areas, and those were civil liberties concerns, and I see a number of people are concerned about that too. Concerns for the security of footage stored in the cloud, and I think that hasn't been answered adequately, why these cameras need to be connected to the internet at all, and then the effectiveness of surveillance cameras in general. And then just very briefly on the research, most of the research is in the UK, that's where most data exists. It's a very surveilled state. And research there found that men were nearly twice as likely to be the targets of surveillance than their presence in the population would suggest. That teenagers, who accounted for less than 20% of the population in the study, made up 40% of the targeted surveillances, and Black people were between 1.5 and 2.5 times more likely to be targeted for surveillance. So those are the issues that we were most concerned with, and trustees know these concerns very well. And I am going to post the link to that document in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ryan.
If anyone else would like to speak, please raise your hand. I am going to read Virginia Norberg's. I'm sorry, I'm looking for it in the chat now. I apologize if only because I know you don't have sound She just mentioned she's more concerned about people's civil liberties being endangered than the crime rate in South Orange. She lives in Maplewood, but she works in South Orange. Brandon Eisenman,
Eisenman.
Eisenman, thank you.
Not a problem. Yeah, I'm actually Democratic Committee, South Orange, District 11. I did have a couple things. One, I missed who was saying how we really shouldn't fear because Microsoft, Sony, et cetera, have all been breached and they do regular patching. I am actually a 20-year, 25-year computer security veteran. I know these systems inside and out. And just because you don't know that you're not breached doesn't mean you haven't been breached. Saying that Microsoft, Sony, and whatnot have all had issues is not actually a really big comfort to me, because these are the companies that can really invest in security, whereas our police department can't, our village can't, and the company that we're buying the system can't. So I don't expect their systems to be secure. And just because you say that they have patched something in previously doesn't bring me any sort of confidence. The second thing that popped up was, mentioning that cameras all over the place, and, indeed they are. I have 3 on my house, 2 in the front of my house, 1 to look at feral cats, 1 to look at my front door, 1 to look at my back door. I've found people stealing from my front porch, hasn't saved me, haven't identified anyone with them. But there's a big difference between cameras that are operated by private businesses and individuals and those that are being run by the police department. A private citizen does not have the ability or the power of the policing power and the awesome enforcement power that you have with that. Take, for example, the Maplewood police department shoving children who belong in Maplewood out into Irvington. Dear God, if they just saw a bunch of dark-skinned kids on camera, they wouldn't have reacted any different. So those are 2 of the things. I guess the other part that I had, the other question is there are likely to be false positives of, you think you saw someone properly through the camera and the AI or whatever. Now that we're talking that this might be part of the product that we're purchasing is the facial recognition, is how are we tracking when someone is incorrectly recognized and that it's, just my neighbor who lives next door to me and not, someone from wherever. So those are 3 things I had, and I will let everything else go, and I'm sure we'll have other conversations. Thank you.
Thank you. It's like you had internal timer. So thank you so much. Ms. Carter?
Hi, I want to thank Trustee Collier for putting together this forum this evening and for all of her due diligence in terms of sharing with us the data points on the PowerPoint. That said, I think that facial recognition cameras are very racially discriminatory against Asians and Blacks. I think this money would be better spent on more neighborhood policing. I also think when you talk about car crashes, that is really not of interest to me when I'm interested in hearing about crime and not car crashes. So for me, that PowerPoint was not relevant to this discussion. I also would like to know what is the maintenance cost for these additional 70 cameras, because we have to factor that into the budget, not just the cost of the purchase itself. And even though you say that no one else can break into it or whatever, we know that Black males, particularly Black teen males, are the ones who are mostly targeted when it comes to crime, whether it's in this town or any other. And finally, the crime has gone down even during the pandemic when it has risen elsewhere. And on another note, the horrific murder that happened in Maplewood, there were cameras in that field, and there is not one person that's even been arrested for that crime. I yield the rest of my time to Mr. Vitale.
Thank you, Ms. Carter. Ms. Dello?
Whoops.
Unmute. Okay, it takes a little time. Hi, I just keep asking the same question, and I'm interested in how everybody groups. So is this a matter of either security in the, and I'm talking about the, I'll call them villagers or participants. Is it a matter of security or civil rights or budget? Civil rights, when I talk about civil rights, I think I mentioned privacy, civil rights, or budget, or hacking. There are, I see it, if I were going to make a chart, I would see like, I would put privacy maybe with civil liberties. Maybe that would be wrong, I'm not sure. And then I would put budget, and then I would put security. And I would have a 3-column chart, and there it would be. I'm just really curious now that we have not gone into small groups and there's no way for you to really put all this together. I keep advising you should probably review the chart, the chat, but what is the major concern of most people? Is it security? Is it budget? Is it privacy, civil liberties? I'm just trying to get educated about how everybody feels, as I know you are, Donna, and everybody else working towards this. And I'm curious for like some sort of summary like this. What's everybody's major concern? That's it. I didn't really have any minutes. I don't have anything to say myself except for what I said in the chat. And I'm looking for information like everybody else is, I guess. Some people have very strong opinions about it. I'm just wondering where those opinions go in my 3-column chart. Sorry, that's what I have.
Thank you, Ms. Dello.
That's a great segue to say there is a feedback form that we are asking everyone to fill out because we do want feedback from the community. Ms. Bug Levine, it actually sent me a message. She was having an issue raising her hand. So Ms. Bug Levine, if you would like to speak.
Is anybody gonna deal with that question or?
We're answering all of the questions at the end, Ms. Dello.
Oh, okay. Great, thank you.
Hi, I apologize. It keeps telling me that I can't turn my video on. So, because it says the host won't allow me to turn my video on.
That's fine, Ms. Bug Levine. You can go ahead. We'll figure it out if we can. Naris, if there's a way for you to do it on the background.
You just told me thank you as I asked you to start your video. Thank you so much. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Trustee Collier. First of all, I want to thank the trustees of the police department and all of the residents who have really pushed for this meeting and who are a part of this meeting. Because for me as a resident, it's just been a great opportunity for me to listen and learn. And I thank you. I have 2 quick questions. I don't want to repeat what others have said. And my first is I just have a background in domestic violence issues. And I'm just wondering, with the connection to the internet, I know there've been some questions about why hacking matters. And I'm just curious, have there been instances where abusers have hacked into such cameras, particularly if they have internet access, in order to track spouses or girlfriends or partners? And if you could give me just some information on that. And then my second question is really about the body cameras. And I didn't hear all of it, so I apologize if this has already been said. But I understand from the thread as well that the state will be paying for body cameras for the South Orange Police Department. If there's a question of when this is happening, if these cameras are coming before these street cameras are coming before the body cameras. Is it possible to have both come at the same time so that there is much more of a realistic understanding as to where a lot of resident concerns are with police officers not having body cameras and then getting reimbursed by the state? Does it have to wait until the state is going to pay for it? Are there other ways to think about this creatively so that the body cameras will come sooner rather than later? Those were my two questions. Thank you again, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else that would like to speak? Please raise your hand. If not, we're going to move to Ben Vitale, and then we will move to answering some of the questions that were put on. So is there any last minute? Okay, wait, I see a hand, Ms. Dello, and Miss.
Sorry, I just had one other question that I forgot, and I think another issue that would go into my chart would be what's the difference between the internet connection and a closed connection? I think that sounds like it's another concern that I'm hearing from people. So why does it need to be internet as opposed to closed connection and stuff like that? So I think that's maybe another issue. I know I'm only bringing up issues, but that's kind of what I do. I kind of summarize things. I hear what everybody's saying and then I put them together. So that's just my last, I know I'm only asking questions and not really giving a lot of information coming from my side, but
okay. I'm going to move to Ms. Dello. Thank you so much. I'm going to move to Mr. Davis only because we're trying to limit people to 3 minutes. So Mr. Davis.
Yes, I'm just curious, we're not curious, but I'm requesting that the town leaders, this is being recorded, so someone take a look at the comments, questions, and then figure out, I think this is also for the CPC to probably do, figure out how to maybe synthesize these concerns into some type of communique back to the public with some responses that they can at least, think about. To whatever the case may be, although it's
Mr. Davis, your connection is digitizing a little bit.
For the town to go through topics like this. It may not be the most formal.
Mr. Davis, we've actually lost reception for you. I think the tone of your question is that, are we going to share back answers plus a summary of the concerns that we're hearing? And indeed we are. That is, that's part of the follow-up here. We'll take the chat, it can be saved. We'll kind of digest it and, map things out in the quadrant that I shared that frames our decision-making process. So that would be the answer to your question that I think I heard. And also, to a few of these other questions, we promised to end at 8:30. I'm going to give Sergeant Lombardi and Director Wilkinson a chance to address anything that they think they can provide very quickly. And then we'll kind of summarize and wrap it up here. But please know that it is our absolute intention to share back out to the community what we hear in this forum, share back out to the community what we gather in the forums. Obviously, it'll be summarized, it'll be anonymous to the extent that it comes in the form of the forums. But I'll go to Sergeant Lombardi first. Was there a question or two that you think you can knock off fairly quickly?
You're muted, Sergeant.
Sorry about that. So two things real quick. One is in regards to our data being stored on the cloud. Our data is not stored on the cloud. It is stored on the camera locally. It is not remotely stored. It stays on that camera for 30 days. And then if we have to use it for evidence, it is downloaded via the internet, as has been highlighted by multiple people during this discussion. And then it is put onto our secure servers for evidentiary purposes. Also, a concern was brought up about facial recognition.
Wait a minute, before you go any farther.
Yeah.
On that particular section, and the data itself is encrypted when it's transmitted and received from the camera through the Verkada site to our systems. It's encrypted at all 3 points, transmission and receive.
And just the other point, thank you, Stan. The other point about possibly building Verkada's facial recognition algorithm. In 2019, some agencies started using Clearview AI, which pulled images of individuals off of social media and used it to build an algorithm, and got a lot of law enforcement agencies across the country in a lot of hot water. You can look that up on your own. Our system does not connect to Verkada. It does not connect to any database. And I'm speaking specifically about the Verkada system with the face detect. So we're not building any algorithm. We're not sharing anything with them. That's our internal thing that are used by our site administrators and our investigators when they need it. So I just want to clear up that it's not building anything. It's not sharing anything. It's not accessible to anybody from the outside.
Perfect.
Mr. Lombardi, can I ask, because I just think that these are just a couple quick questions. Can you, from the tour commander perspective, I know it was listed in FAQs, but one of the questions was how many people will have access to the data? So if you can just quickly go through that number. And then the last question that I also think is easy is, or not easy, but it would be a easier answer, is the body cameras and the timing of how the body cameras are coming out with this camera system, which we've already had kind of running in the background. So maybe if you can answer those two questions. And then Mr. Wilkinson, so I do want to add, I also am in IT. I think that when people say, Microsoft has been hacked or this company has been hacked, I think when people say that, they're saying it because you're a little bit more aware after it has been done. And so you do kind of tighten up your processes. And so I believe that is where that comment was coming from. As a person that also, we have a university and we're always attuned, we have tightened up all of our cybersecurity just to ensure that things are a little bit more tighter. But Mr. Lombardi, if you can just answer those two questions, that would be great.
Okay, so as far as the total amount of authorized users for the live feed, that's the tour commanders, there's total of 8. Okay, because that's how many frontline patrol supervisors we have. You can look up our table of organization and see that very clearly. At any given time, there's only one person viewing that because there's only one person assigned to that post. As far as the site administrators on a daily basis, that changes. We're also in the process of hiring officers and officers retiring. That number fluctuates. It could be as low as 6. It could be as high as 8. Obviously, we don't have a chief of police right now. We have acting chief Dolanak. That would be another user. So you can see just that practical example of how that number can fluctuate with the site administrators. Trustee Jones, the second question in regards to the tour
was the body cameras. It was the timing of the body cameras, and then just if you want to talk about the delay of why it took a little bit longer. And I know a lot of.
Okay, so there is everybody's seen the news. There is a pandemic, and I think Acting Chief Dolanak would probably be better to speak on that because he's much better versed in the intricacies of what's happening with that acquisition.
Okay, so Acting Chief Dolanak.
Yes, Trustee Jones. In regards to the body cameras, in our last, I'm sorry. There we go. In regards to the body cameras, in our last budget planning cycle in 2020, retired Chief Kroll requested an allocation of $40,000 for body cameras for the police department, and that was approved. So regardless of what the legislature did, we were going to have some amount of body cameras for South Orange Police Department this year. In November of 2020, really what would be the end of the municipal budget cycle, the legislature passed Public Law 2020-128 and 129, mandating body cameras for all uniformed patrol officers and certain other police officers as well, depending on their function, and then authorized $58 million to be distributed to law enforcement agencies throughout the state in order to fund this mandate. So from November to June, the Office of the Attorney General was planning that grant program and accepting applications from law enforcement agencies and then distributing the funding accordingly. So it wasn't until June 1st that AG Graywall announced the awards, at which point South Orange was given approximately $96,000. And what that amount does is it will allow us to purchase 47 body-worn cameras for this agency. So at this point, on July 12th, I believe it was, at the last Board of Trustees meeting, the trustees approved acceptance of that grant funding. And now we are in the process of contacting the vendor we've selected and reviewing the contract on a purchase and the quote, and we'll be directing the funding to them once all the paperwork is approved by the village administrator and the Board of Trustees, and we can proceed with beginning a purchase order and then acquiring the equipment. Lieutenant Acevedo is in charge of this particular project, sort of the nuts and bolts and day-to-day, and he has spoken with our vendor and has advised me that they have equipment available and it should not take an extended amount of time. However, given what's happening with all sorts of distribution networks and manufacturing lately, I hope that is the case. However, I can say with some degree of certainty that in 2021, South Orange Police Department will have body cameras. We will be following the Attorney General's policy on this that was released at the same time as the funding award announcement, and we will implement and train our officers, and you will see us using body cameras on a daily basis.
Thank you, Acting Chief. Very helpful. I want to jump in here because Village President Collum has asked me to give her the floor, and so there she is with a big smile. I'm going to go ahead and let her go, and then we will. I think we're likely to close the event. Take into account all the information in your chat. I'm going to share that input form one more time. If you haven't had a chance to talk and you'd like to, or if you would just like to talk in a quieter venue, please do that. And thank you all so very much for joining in this discussion and in this policy review. Very, very much appreciated.
Thank you, Trustee Collier. I took some notes on some of the questions that were posed and some great points that we heard from our residents tonight. And for those of you who came a little bit later, I know we were admitting people in. I'm Sheena Cullum. I'm the village president in South Orange. I think it's important just to share with you a little bit of what this looks like in real life, because I know there's a lot of chat interaction with links to data and looking at what's happening nationally in other towns. But from my perspective, what I deal with is real life residents who either have been victimized or have had a crime committed against them, and they call. And I think I want to start by saying that public safety is always going to be the priority for everyone. Is that when we create a safer community that benefits everyone, whether it's our residents, it's our guests, it's our children. And as we heard one of the speakers said, in the past couple months, we've seen some atrocities in this community. That's not indicative of crime going up. Our numbers continue to go down, and that's not by accident. It's a testament to good policing that we have in our community. And so for the officers here and for the ones who aren't here, they've done a really tremendous job with significantly less resources than they had 10 years ago. What we have when you go into the police department right now, when you think about a communications room and AI and security and all this stuff that's going on, you might think of kind of like what you see on TV, but that's actually not what's going on. We have a dedicated communications room where our dispatchers are located. Those are the people that you speak to when you call our non-emergency number, 973-763-3000. Always have that saved in your phone. And then that's 911 operations, right? So you have your dispatchers, and then you have your actual TOR commander, which in the instance of South Orange is your lieutenant. That is the third highest ranking individual. You have a chief, we have an acting chief right now. Typically we have a captain, and then we have the person who's in charge of the TORs. So there are a couple monitors there where literally you would have to look up at them. They're kind of in thumbnails. So we do not have the resources nor the allocation nor the bodies to literally fill a whole communications room that you can see in some cities or towns across the country, certainly not most, where there's literally this proactive surveillance of residents. That's not the case here. It's never been the case here, is that it really is more of a retroactive tool. I can tell you that during a state of emergency, it is important to see the live feed, because I'm also the Deputy Office of Emergency Management Coordinator, is that as things are happening in our town and in a volatile situation, whether it's a storm, power outages, things that are happening during snow, is that you have a live feed and you know if accidents are occurring and where you need to deploy some of the resources, not just police, but fire, et cetera. So that's kind of the overview of when you walk into our headquarters, is that most of our patrols, and we have 4 different patrols, we have an A squad, a B squad, day and nights, is that they're out in their vehicles, and their TOR commander is the person who's in that room with our dispatchers. It is very much a retroactive tool. I did hear that it doesn't prevent any type of crime from occurring, but I question some of that data when looking at it, because how do we know that? Because for a lot of us, we either say that we have dogs when we don't have dogs, right? And we post that in our yard. I have a Maltipoo. I don't think it's scaring anybody away. Some of us have Ring doorbells, and we make it clear to people that there is some level of video that's in place. Most businesses that you walk into, they post things as well to put people on notice. So I'm not sure whether there is a deterrent or there isn't a deterrent. And that's one thing that I'd like to explore a little bit more. In terms about false positives, and this is really interesting, and I had a chance to talk to Mr. Vitale about this. So as you know, I do always carry a radio. Many of you reach out to me to ask what's going on. I always like to stay very engaged with what's happening with public safety. And one of the problems, and it's one for us to discuss, is as it works today, is a caller. We're relying on a caller to come in and let us know what they've seen. And in many instances, the implicit bias is already there, especially as Ms. Carter had noted, is Black and Asian people, is that when you are a victim of a crime, or you saw a crime, or you think you saw a crime, or you're trying to report something, those biases come into play. So we're relying on somebody who's calling dispatch and describing who they believe the suspect is. So that's the stage you have without cameras, is relying on that witness to tell you. And of course, our police department, as does any agency, responds. Now, we've been working on certainly the de-escalation and with our dispatchers and identifying things a lot more specifically. So when we get some of these calls that are not emergent, is that we're talking those callers through it. But I want to be clear that there is already that bias that exists today. Now with the technology that allows people to go to videos, it does provide a little bit more precision than what I think we would see from most callers. And when we talk about false positives, I think it's so critical to understand the actual law enforcement process, is that just because a positive match might happen and somebody says, well, Sheena may look like Summer, it is only, and we don't look alike, I'm just using an example, is that this is not what actually compels a case to move forward. It just provides one bit of evidence for our detectives bureau to investigate a little bit further. So if they say that there is a positive, it looks like it could be Summer or Sheena, then a further investigation needs to identify where was Summer. Wait, Summer was in France. Sheena was walking her multi-poo. So you eliminate people. So never believe that technology alone is the way that our police department or any law enforcement agency solves crimes. It's one bit. And then there's a statutory process, obviously, with our full judicial system that actually results in an arrest, et cetera. So I just want that to be clear, is a positive on a Verkada camera or any type of camera that has some level of detection, all of a sudden means that somebody is going to be arrested. It starts an additional aspect in the process. And to the question we saw in the chat earlier, is that the board has why 70 cameras. I just want to clarify that is that we've not approved 70 cameras. That's a very large number of cameras. I believe what we're looking at right now, I don't have it in front of me, it's in the FAQs, is that this budget allocation was for 15 to 20. I know a few folks had compared us to Maplewood. Maplewood has well over 100, but granted, there are certainly differences, is that technology has changed significantly. So this is a new type of camera that is being deployed, but we do have 100 cameras in a sister, community. Our school district has significantly more than 100. And I don't believe anybody's intention is to harm. It is that safety and security is so important for every member of our community. And we did hear his name tonight. It's so sad. I'm not going to get emotional, but we did lose somebody, in our towns. And somebody had mentioned that there were cameras there and it didn't solve anything. The cameras weren't these type of cameras, right? There were cameras there and they weren't good enough. So as we talk about cameras, their locations, their capabilities, it may not have deterred crime, but sometimes it can help us get justice for people who desperately need it. So I just want to say that on behalf of the Board of Trustees, I am so grateful. I love that people are here. I love that Trustee Collier has put so much blood, sweat, and tears because it's an important topic. And as elected officials, this isn't what we do. So a lot of the things that we get from other professionals in the community are so helpful to us in our policy making and coming up with the outcomes that we think are indicative of the values that we have in South Orange. But I just want everybody to be thinking about those things as we move forward in this conversation, is that there are a lot of trade-offs. And the last part, I'm sorry to jump back, is that when I started, I talked about how much resources we had in the police department. To their credit and to their professionalism, a department has gone from 57 officers to 45. That right there in a tax impact analysis would be a 20 to 30% increase on your municipal portion this year. So we have expected them to do a lot more with less. And these tools were a part of being able to redirect some of those resources to other things that our community wants. So a trade-off there, as some have indicated, is take the cameras away from police. What that actually looks like in real time is that our detectives bureau, which is normally staffed at 6, we go between 4 and 6, right? So 4 to 6 people, and they work different tours, et cetera. And then we have about 300 or so Part 1 crimes, which we call serious crimes. That's not somebody's having a party and the music's too loud. Those are serious crimes. So if you think about it, it might average out to approximately 1 a day. If we are not able to use our own system and we have to rely on canvassing, knocking on doors, looking for witnesses, getting Ring, doorbell security, and trying to use that as evidence, and some being thrown out if it's not time-stamped correctly, et cetera, we do need to look at and think about an additional aspect of resources and hiring into the Detectives Bureau if our residents are going to get the same level of service that they get after we've reduced many of the ranks. And those are the trade-offs between, as one of the commenters noted, the civil liberties, the budget aspect, and also the public safety aspect. So, and they're all interconnected. So thank you for that moment, Trustee Collier. I found tonight to be very, very informative, and I certainly am going to review everything that's in the chat.
Well, thank you. That's super helpful. And it's also a testament to the fact that you used to be the chair of the Public Safety Committee, and you've really taken a deep, deep dive into police operations as part of your interest in your role as an elected official. And so definitely thank you. Very much appreciated. And with that, I think I'm gonna go ahead and close it. I did put the input form in one more time, and if you've got more or new questions that you'd like us to take a look at, we are more than happy to hear them and to pull everything together in a summary and or add it to our FAQ. And we'll keep you posted as we continue this process of reviewing the policy and reviewing how these cameras ought to be deployed. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we will all see each other again soon, I'm sure. Have a great night. We're over time a little bit, but certainly worth it to spend the time.